Okay. So these past couple of weeks, did everybody get a chance to practice, or was everybody just taking a Dharma break altogether?
I
Well-
focus more on Flight of the Garuda, but I did some of our daily practice.
Yeah, good. Good.
I was reading some of our practices. Now I have to bring all my material down to Curtis because I managed somehow to knock all of it. I had it all arranged neatly on my table here, and I knocked all of it off my table. And what I'd forgotten to do was paper clip it all together. And I've never been able to sort it out and get the right pages with the right. So it really frustrated me that I did that.
Wow.
And sadly, there was no one to blame but myself. I hate when that happens.
It sounds like me having to save things on my computer to 3 different hard drives. Now, what hard drive did I put that on?
Well, that would have been simpler, but these were just pages. And luckily, I have my Bardo Thödol book in the yellow binder, but the others were just neatly arranged, but they weren't clipped together, and they just went all over the place. And
Okay.
that's a good chance to practice too when you do that to yourself.
Yeah. Hi, Curtis. Good to see you tonight. At
Good to see you too, Lance.
At least,
Good
at
to see
least your
Garrett.
picture.
What?
At least your picture.
Yeah, I'm switching to my laptop.
Okay.
I love
So,
that picture. Oh, you look toasty.
Yes, I thank you. You know that's me reading 100,000 songs of Milarepa on the lawn at UVA.
Yes.
Yep. You can't tell the book unless you got it. You can zero in. You can't tell it on the Zoom.
Hi, Bhavani. We haven't seen you in a few days. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. Trying to stay warm
Okay.
like everybody else, but did you all have snow up there? We didn't have any snow today, just cold weather.
Yeah, we had snow overnight.
How much did you get, Lance?
Well, I can't tell exactly because it was a lighter, fluffier snow. So I don't know exactly how they measure it, but nevertheless, earlier in the week, we had a wet snow, and that was easily 4 inches on my car. And this one was maybe 6 or 7 inches on my car. But like I said, it was a light, fluffy snow. So
We got 8 inches. We got 8 inches. Sorry, hold on, I got to get off. That's me.
you
We had
had
the
8 inches?
reverse of you, Lance. We had 8 inches with the first snow, but only an inch last night.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Being
it
by
must
the
have
water.
snowed,
Yeah.
it must have snowed a lot, in a short period of time, because when I went to bed, it hadn't started snowing at all. And then this morning when I got up, it was all done.
Wow.
Yeah.
We got 8 inches on Monday and 3 inches last night. At least that's what I counted.
Wow.
Gary, did you get about the same numbers?
Yeah, well, I'm just a mile away from you, so it wasn't
What's all the thing you're doing?
it wasn't a big problem.
All right, well, let's get started. Kate, good to see you that you're here. Katie and John just came in, so good to see everybody here. Thank you all for coming. And Debbie, when you're ready, you can screen share and we can do our opening prayers.
Doing that right now. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness. be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. And assume your best meditation posture. Relax, release. Bring your mind home to clear and focused present awareness. And when you're ready, turn your mind in. Rest in the nature of mind without any contrivance or manipulation.
All right, thank you all very much for coming tonight. And after a nice long holiday weekend, the week that we had, 2 weeks, so good that everybody's remembered to come back. So, so I just want to give a little bit of a review of where we are before we start. And I want to do that by, here is a stupa, you know, and maybe you all are familiar with this. And the proportions of a stupa like this is the same proportions as the human body, as like the Buddha, sitting in meditation position. So there's some drawings where the Buddha is superimposed on the structure of a stupa. And you'll see that the heart is here in this this part right here, and then up here is the head, and so on. So so when we think of this, we can think of this as with the deities that we've been learning about in the Bardo, that the deities would be up here in this central part here, and then down here would be all the associated deities with them. So in the case of the wrathful deities would be like the Pisachi and the Matara Buddhas and the Gatekeepers and so on like that. Around would be this lower level here, and going out around would be like the courtyard. So if you can think of this as a palace, and in the center of the palace is the stupa, but then around the stupa would be this courtyard where there's other things that are happening. So that's about where we are. That's where we're going to talk about tonight, is those beings that are in the lower part of the stupa, and then around the courtyard. And there's inner gatekeepers and outer gatekeepers. So if you have the chart that we sent to you several months ago, this one here. So this is a two-dimensional picture of what this is in 3 dimensions. So if you have that handy, it might help you to follow what we're going to talk about. So to begin with, we'll take a short recitation with the purification part, because when we begin, we should refresh our purification, our motivation for the teaching and for the practice that we're embarking on. So if we turn to page 14 in our Bardo Thödol book,
Excuse me,
if you don't-
Lance.
page 14,
Lance, which chart is that?
this is the wrathful deity chart.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So page 14 in the text. And so this is the natural liberation of habitual tendencies to purification. So I'm going to recite this, and we can chant this all together, keeping your microphones off so we don't feedback, but the 100-syllable mantra that we'll do 3 times. So it begins, it is the unified intention of the body, speech, and mind, of the 42 peaceful and 58 wrathful deities, of the great Buddha field that displays the wisdom that cuts through all ignorance to manifest their wisdom for the benefit of the enlightenment of all sentient beings. Om Ahom Bodhicitta Mahasukha Jana Datu Ah Om Rulu Rulu Hong Jo Hong. Om Ahom Bodhicitta Mahasukha Jana Datu Ah Om Rulu Rulu Hong Jo Hong. Om Ahom Bodhicitta Mahasukha Jana Datu Ah Om Rulu Rulu Hong Jo Hong. From the field of reality's expanse, uncreated and pure, within a celestial palace, which is a seminal point of light, pure, unceasing, and radiant, through the natural expressive power of one's own mind, uncontrived and empty, intrinsic awareness, radiant and empty, arises in the form of Vajrasattva. Seated upon a bejeweled throne, adorned with lotus, sun, and moon cushions, The right hand holds a Vajra in the heart, symbolizing the union of awareness of absolute wisdom and emptiness. The left hand supports a bell resting on the hip, symbolizing the union of wisdom appearances and emptiness. And the head is adorned with a garland of perfect Buddhas, representing the 5 enlightened families of those gone to bliss. Thus, Vajrasattva manifests in the form of the Buddha body of perfect resource, exquisitely adorned with silks and jewels, seated in the posture of royal ease, with the right leg extended and the left drawn in. Radiating at the heart is the seed syllable hung, surrounded by the 100-syllable mantra. Om Vajrasattva Samaya, help to protect my vow to purify myself. May you remain firm with me. Grant me the complete satisfaction. Grow with me. Be loving towards me. Grant me the attainments to master the powers beyond body and nature. Show me all the deeds of body, speech, and mind. Make my mind heart good, virtuous, and auspicious. Revel in the bliss of the 4 joys, O Blessed One, who embodies the essence within me. Do not abandon me. Grant me the realizations of the indestructible nature. Make me one with you. Thus, I signify my unity with non-duality. Ah. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tenopa Dristadredo Me Bhava Suto Kayo Me Bhava Supo Kayo Me Bhava Anuraktu Me Bhava Sara Siddhi Me Prayatsa Sara Karma Sutsa Me Sitsantriya Kuru Hong Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Saratada Gata Bajra Mame Munsa Bajri Bhawa Mahasamaya Satwaha Om Bajra Satwa Samaya Manupalaya Bajra Satwa Tenopa Dristadredo Me Bhawa Suto Kayo Me Bhawa Supo Kayo Me Bhawa Anuraktu Me Bhava Sara Siddhi Me Prayatsa Sara Karma Sutsa Me Sitsantriya Kuru Hong Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Sara Tada Gata Bajra Mame Munsa Bajri Bhawa Mahasamaya Satwaha Om Bajra Sattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Tenopa Dristadredo Me Bhava Suto Kayo Me Bhava Supo Kayo Me Bhava Anuraktu Me Bhava Sara Siddhi Me Prayatsa Sara Karma Sutsa Me Sitsantriya Kuru Hong Ha 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 ho Bhagavan Saratada Gata Bajra Mame Munsa Bajri Bhawa Mahasamaya Satwaha. Okay. So now we go to page 49 is where we left off last time. So last time we talked about the Matara and the Vasachi deities. So we visualize that there is this ocean of suffering, this great ocean of suffering, and the Matara deities are around the periphery, the circumference of that great ocean. And they are there to help us by rescuing us, by reaching our hands that are uplifted out of the water there to be pulled free, to be rescued in order to be able to go back to the Bardo of reality and to be able to seek enlightenment. So, and then the Vasachi deities are those that are in the ocean of suffering, who are stirring it up, who are keeping us from falling to the bottom of the ocean of suffering, keeping us so that we're buoyant and so that we can get to the top, to the surface, to be able to see the Matara and reach the Matara, have them reach us and rescue us from the ocean of suffering. So that was the visualization of the Matara and the Pisachi. And then we talked about the gatekeepers, is I think where we left off on page 49. We talked about them. So the gatekeepers are there to keep us from falling further into what would be our rebirth, being falling into the form realm, going into looking for bodies, finding bodies, and so on. So the gatekeepers are there to remind us of our teachings, the practices that we've done, to be able to maintain our awareness of the of the four modes of birth: the egg birth, the womb birth, the heat and moisture birth, and miraculous birth, so that we can recognize those and we can close off so that we're not being reborn through those births, that we stay, as a Bardo being. And also they are there to remind us of the four immeasurables, the four loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So these are the gatekeepers that are there to help us to do that. And the channel, so it says here on page 49, you say Om Ah Hung. And the channel branch of the eastern gate of the skull within one's brain is the horse-headed Anakusa Vajratesaji, white in color, carrying an iron hook in his skull. An iron hook, Za, an iron hook. And the yellow, and in the channel branch in the southern gate of the skull within one's brain is the sow-headed Pasa Vajramoka, yellow in color, carrying a noose. So a noose to tie us up, to bind us. The hook is to hook on to the deities. The noose is to tie us to the deity. In the channel branch of the western gate of the skull, within one's brain is the lion-headed Spota, Vajraloka, red in color, carrying an iron chain and a skull. So we visualize an iron chain. So the mudra is our two hands are like this. And the left hand is the back of the hand is facing outwards, and the right hand is facing outwards. But the fingers like this are forming like a chain link. And this is locking us up to the deities, locking us up to the deities. So the first is hooking. The second is binding as a lasso. The next one is a chain that is locking us up. And then the fourth one is in the channel branch of the northern gate of the skull. Within one's brain is the snake-headed Ganta, Vajravatali, green in color, holding a bell and a skull. So now the mudra for this is our left hand is out like this. So the back of the hand is facing us. And then our right hand is like this, and our knuckles go together. So the right hand and the left hand are going together like this. And then we're taking our two little fingers and our two index fingers and locking them together. And this is forming a bell that is ringing happiness, that is ringing rejoicing. So we are hooking, we are binding, we are locking ourselves up, and then we are rejoicing that we are not going any further, that we are here at this gatekeeper, and this gatekeeper is helping us to remain a Bardo being, not to be born again. So it's Za, Hom, Bam, Ho. So Ho is an expression of happiness, of rejoicing. Za, Hom, Bam, Ho. So in many of the practices that we do, you'll see that, and you may recite that, and you may do the hand mudras, or you may see the monastics doing those mudras and so on. So this is where another place where we can see that it's being used to help us to remember all this is all mindfulness, to be aware of all the symbolism and so on. So the gatekeepers are here for that. So now, at this point, it's important to recognize that we are approaching this whole process from the top down, that we have died and our spirit has been set free, and that we are hopefully in the one with that spirituality who recognizes that and is able, through the clear light, is able to become Buddha at that very moment of death. If we miss that opportunity, then we go into the Bardo of reality, and we have the opportunities through the different Bardo beings, the peaceful deities and so on, to be liberated through them, through our mindfulness of our practices that we have done while we were in the Bardo of living. So if we miss those opportunities, then we go further down, and then we go into the Bardo of the wrathful deities, falling down. Our habitual tendencies, the Vidyadhara, are there to remind us of our habitual tendencies and so on. So we're slipping further and further down. So it's from the top down. The top is that we become Buddha immediately upon death. And then we slip further down. We become Buddha as we go down in different ways, in different degrees in the stupa and so on. So finally, we get to the point where, we take a womb. If you remember, we talked about that, the different forms of birth and so on, and how we slip into being born again and so on like that. So there's this point here where now we have, as I said, we come to this very base of the mandala, the very base of the stupa, and we are with these beings who are much more like us. The interesting thing about this is, from the top down, we're examining this from our death. However, Carl Jung, I think many of you know Carl Jung, know his name. And he was a great, psychologist, of back when, in the late 1800s or something like that. And he was a great spiritualist. And he recognized the Bardo Thödol as being a great book that really brings together, symbolizes the human experience. And he said, you know what? He says, the way we should approach this is from the bottom up. That as we are recognizing our human nature, and as we are transcending our human nature, that we are starting at the base of the stupa, the base of the mandala, and we are working our way up to the top in this Bardo of living, this Bardo of who we are now, the Bardo where we experience dreams, the Bardo where we experience meditation, the Bardo of being, this Bardo now. So we're approaching this and working our way up to be able to do that. So this is very helpful to be able to imagine this. And it might be something, if you really want to be a student of the Bardo Thödol, that to take this book, and maybe this book or one of the other translations that are given, and read it backwards. Each section backwards, not, start at page 216 and then read that backwards and go back, but each section. So it shows us how we're approaching the stupa, the mandala, and working our way up. This was the suggestion of Carl Jung. And it's very, very powerful. It really helps to understand, how this process is all working, so that it makes us more familiar with when we die and we have to approach it from the top down. We're completely familiar with it because we've already approached it from the bottom up as a human being and so on. And we've done the practices and we become clear with the way in which these relationships, the symbolic relationships, help us at each stage and so on.
That's when you speak of the Bardo Thödol, is that the same as the Tibetan Book of the Dead?
Yes, the Bardo Thödol is the correct name.
Yeah, okay. Well, I have the book then, so I just wanted to be sure that I had.
Yeah. So that's the correct name, is the Bardo Thödol. So that's why I use that. Anybody have any questions or comments about this right now? Okay. Okay, so now we're at this point here about with these gatekeepers, because the gatekeepers are keeping us from falling down further, but they're also opening up for us as we are rising up, as we are approaching from the bottom coming up. So they become gatekeepers to hold us into the Bardo beings, preventing us from being reborn. And they open up for us to approach it, to be able to get to the next highest levels and so on. So what they represent is important on both sides, whether we're able to close the door or we're able to open the door, depending on which pathway we are following. So their teachings, what they represent, what they are, the symbolic, they're asking us, what are the 4 enlightened activities? What are the 4 immeasurables? You know, what is the purification of those? What are those? How well do you know these? You know, so they become, you know, the point at which we either are blocked out or we're opened up. You know, we're coming down. If we're not familiar with those, then the gates open up and we fall further down into being reborn. If we're coming up from the bottom, the gates are already closed, but they open up for us if we are able to know what the enlightened activities are and what the 4 immeasurables are. They open up for us to go to the next level. So here on page 50 now is this prayer. It says, to you, the 4 female gatekeepers who are pristine cognition in emanational form. In emanational form. What does that mean? That they have form bodies, that they are emanating like in Nirmanakaya form. So we're meeting people like us. We're meeting people, beings in emanational form. I bow down, make offerings, take refuge and pray. As soon as we, the deceased, die and begin to transmigrate, at that very moment, when the visions of the intermediate state of reality dawn, and we, the deceased, roam alone in cyclic existence, driven by the deep-seated confused perceptions that are up in the brain, may Ankusa and Pasa draw us forward, obstructing the entrances to confusion through the 4 types of birth, and opening the doors to the 4 rights of pure enlightened activity. May Spota and Ganta support us from behind, and thus encircled, may we be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. So either we're studying and we're encountering these and the doors are opening for us, or we're coming down and the doors are closing for us, enabling us to remain in the Bardo beings, to be rescued. So these beings, we meet these beings every day. We are spiritual beings, whether we recognize it or not. We have 3 bodies. We have our physical body, our intellectual body. We also have a spiritual body. And part of our chore in mindfulness is recognizing that spirituality and recognizing it in all beings. And that spirituality comes out very naturally. We may not recognize it as spirituality. There are things that we've said and done over our lifetimes that have been purely spiritual things that maybe we took for granted or something, or just some wisdom or some common sense thing or something like that. But actually it was something that was very profound. And sometimes we hear things from other people, from other beings that are there, that resonate with us, that opens up something within us from hearing it from somebody else. So we may be doing it for ourselves. We may be doing it for others. Others may be doing it for themselves and doing it for us too. It's all interconnected. It's all spiritual. So as we engage in this, we recognize this more and more. We see this happening over and over and over again. It becomes much more recognizable. So as we do this, things begin to happen. There are some things that are very miraculous, that are transcendent. Have you ever met somebody who just seemed to catapult you to another level? And maybe it was something very mundane. Maybe it was something that had to do with work, or maybe it had something to do with family or something like that. It was something mundane. You just met somebody that really changed your life, that helped you in a direction that you didn't think you can go, an upward direction that you didn't think you could go. So these beings here are expressed in another part of the Bardo Thödol. And in the book that we used, the Gourmet Dorje book, I refer you to pages 108 and 109, which is part of the 100 deities, the 100-fold homage to the 100 deities. These deities, the peaceful and the wrathful deities, these deities. And it's another practice. And it's very powerful, but it goes through all these different deities in a very concise way without very much elaboration and so on. And in this 100-fold homage is this part of what's called the projectoresses. These projectoresses are those beings that we will meet, that we can meet, that are there for us to recognize, that can say something to us, can do something to us, can show us something that just literally like catapults us to a level that we may not expect. Now, how stable we are as a result is a result of whatever practices we've engaged in and so on. So we may get there and be surprised by it all. We may be terrorized by it. We may be comforted by it, but we're thrown into that situation, into that awareness. And then depending on how we can relate to that, how stable it becomes and so on. And it can now take us through some levels, pass beyond some other levels. And remember, we've all been here before. We've all been on the stupa before. We've all been in the mandala before. We've all been born many times. We've all died many times. So when we get into this spiritual meditational mind, remembrances start coming. You know, they may not be thoughts that we can think of, you know, oh, I had this life and so on like that, but it's something that is in our heart center. So at this point now, through this gatekeeper now. Now we are being exposed, or we are part of this field, this courtyard that is around the Bardo beings. But this courtyard is full of ordinary beings, full of human beings who are at one level or another very spiritual beings. So the first one is on page 51. It says, homage to the 8 great projectoresses who propel beings to exalted rebirths. So this rebirth can be, coming back down, you're moving down into becoming a human being, but they can also catapult you up into the Bardo to help you as you're learning about the Bardo. It can catapult you up and so on. You may skip right over, say, the Matara and the Pasachi, and be now in the midst of all these, wrathful Haruka class deities. And if you're not prepared for it, like I said, it can be shocking to you. And because you were catapulted there, and maybe you do recognize the Harukas, but you still would want to know about the Matara and the Pasachi that you just kind of literally kind of flew over and so on. So, but on the way coming down, now you're being reborn now into a situation of having a great noble birth, of not having to go through the experiences that we talked about in taking a womb birth and going through all of that we talked about in part 3 of the Bardo Thödol that we did last month, few months ago. So now continuing on here on page 51. I bow down to the projectoress who casts a noose, manifestation of the natural purity of reality. Manifestation of the natural purity of reality. Clothed in flayed hides, she unites the 3 levels of existence with the pure Buddha fields. However, these may manifest and cast her noose of solar rays, projecting beings of the trick heliocosm into higher rebirths. So let's look at this now. So manifestation in the natural purity of reality. So, reality has 2 sides to it, the way we see it, temporary phenomenal reality. There's samsara and there's nirvana, the 2 sides, our dualistic nature, but both the essence of what they both are is the same as the Dharmakaya, is that absolute wisdom that we can't conceptualize, beyond our ability to conceptualize. But manifestation, this is a manifestation of that natural purity. So now wearing these wrathful clothing, flayed hides, and so on, and unites the 3 levels of existence. So what are the 3 levels of existence? The 3 levels of existence are expressed in many different ways, but the gross, the simple way, the outer meaning is that we are upon the ground, and that there is above the ground, and that there is below the ground. So sometimes this is called the 3 spheres. Sometimes this is called the desire realm, the form realm, and the formless, desireless realm. So depending on which practice, which approach, which way you're encountering this, it has different names to it and so on. But at this level, we should look at it, the existences that we are experiencing as ordinary human beings, that There's the ground, there's above ground, and there's below ground. So she unites this. The nous is bringing all this together. With the pure Buddha fields, however, these may manifest and cast her nous of solar rays. So we can imagine that. We can see over on the left side of this page, there is a hand there, and you can see that there is a rope, a noose, and so figuratively, we can imagine what this is doing, bringing all this together. And cast her noose of solar rays. So here we're using the sun as an example that, in this solar system, it's the sun, its gravitational rays are what's holding this all together like a noose. And the sun is sustaining all of this. Projecting beings of the tricheliocosm. This tricheliocosm is, I think it must be a Greek word. I'm not sure where it comes from, but what it means is that there are 3,000 clusters of world systems that each have 1,000 worlds in them. So when we look up at the sky, in a clear sky at night, and we see all those stars, and we're seeing them, we don't know where they are in relationship to each other. They seem to be, creating these patterns and so on like that. But some of them are just ancient lights, stars and galaxies and so on. Some of them are much closer to us and are much older or newer, I should say. So this relationship, you see, is mind-boggling. It's part of this phenomenal nature. And now they launched the Webb telescope, and maybe this is going to really help, identify, some of these things and so on, and maybe it will, but spiritually speaking, it's just all part of this cosmic thing that is happening that is phenomenal. It may come to pass that whatever they discover, there's 150 more questions that come. It poses more questions than it answers. Who knows? We'll have to see. But here it is, being expressed as the tricheliocosm. So projecting beings of the tricheliocosm into higher rebirth. So what does this mean? It means it's not just here on Earth. It means that there are beings all throughout this cosmos that we don't recognize. This is the above ground. There's stuff happening above ground that we don't recognize. What we see are the stuff on the ground or maybe below the ground. What we're talking about now, the stuff that's out there in the other galaxies and the other, super universes or whatever you want to call them and so on. And there are some great spiritual books that are written about things like this. There are great spiritual beings who have had, spiritual connections with this. I don't know if you all are familiar with the Urantia book. It's a mind blower. So there's many things that are out there. The Bardo Thödol and Buddhism, generally speaking, is one way of trying to explain all this to us. But there's other ways. It's not exclusive. It's very good. The Buddhism is very good because there's so much there. There's so much scripture, and it's very much repeatable. And we can move along. We can see ourselves move along. And this is the beauty of the Buddhism. The Dharma system is magnificent. There's nothing else like it that I know about. But there are wisdom texts from other traditions that talk about the mechanics of some of this phenomenal stuff that is mind-blowing, So, but it doesn't teach you how to be able to transcend it. I haven't found that. The Buddhism teaches us how to be able to do that. So it's projecting beings of the trichilocosm into higher rebirths. Okay, so now we go to the next one. And I know this probably presents more questions than it does answers. I know this is the first time you're hearing it. So now we go to page 52. I bow down to the projectoress who cast a pike. Pike is like a spear, you know, holding a blood-filled skull and casting a pike. She purifies the 5 dissonant mental states to dispel permanently the diseases of conceptual thoughts. The force of her compassion, rich and skillful means, projecting human beings into higher rebirths. So here it's very specific about human beings. But you see the pike that she has on the left side of the page. You see that there is it's like a spear, like a Curtis. Lance and Curtis kind of go together. So this is an analogy. This is a metaphor of being able to purify the 6 dissonant mental states. What are the 5 mental dissonant mental states? So if you look at, one of the charts that I sent you, so we're talking about fundamental ignorance, we're talking about attachment, desire, we're talking about aversion, hatred, we're talking about pride, we're talking about doubt. These are the dissonant mental states, the fundamental dissonant mental states, the 5 poisons that make up all these emotions and so on.
Lance, isn't it jealousy?
Jealousy could be used in there too. Yes. Depends on, yes. Jealousy could be there too. Greed, envy, jealousy, greed, and pride. Yes. So here in this book, in this translation, they use doubt. So to dispel permanently the diseases of conceptual thought. What are diseases of conceptual thoughts? The conceptual thoughts are in our brain, in our intelligence. To be able to blast through those so that we no longer have those dissonant mental thoughts like that, those conceptual thoughts, misconceptions, our mental misconceptions, the arrogance that we think we know, to get to the point that we don't know, and to be free of that, to be free of being a human being, the brain of a human being. The force of her compassion, rich and skillful means, projecting human beings into higher rebirths. Now, it's not specific about what those higher rebirths are, but the point is that we can sense this, we can experience this. Like I said, you can meet somebody at some time in your life who just seems to just catapult you to a higher awareness than you had before. You may not be stable in it, but now it presents itself, and now you say, oh, everything I thought was true is no longer true. I see that it's only true at a relative level, but then above that is now a whole other set of circumstances. So projecting human beings in the higher rebirth. So this is, the projectress who cast a pike. The next one is, I bow down to the projectress who rings a bell, holding to her heart a blood-filled skull. She subjugates the entire trichilocosm to secure ignorant sentient beings in reality's expanse. The resonance of her charisma, projecting beings of the trichilocosm in higher rebirths, projecting beings of the chiliocosm. So this is a cluster of 1,000 worlds, these maybe inner worlds. So there's the trichiolocosm, which is 3,000 of those, and this is the 1,000. This is many, many of those. So we go back, it says, I bow to the projectress who rings a bell, holding in her heart a blood-filled skull. And so the blood-filled skull, if you remember, we see on page 52 on the right side, we see this hand that's holding a bell, and we see the skull that is filled with blood. So what this means, what the blood means, what the skull and the blood means is unqualified enjoyment. Unqualified enjoyment of all things. Not seeing the dualistic nature of things, not being repulsed by any of that, just pure enjoyment. And ringing the bell is the wisdom bell, is the rejoicing of this. She subjugates the entire trichiolosum. So now all this, she subjugates this, it becomes under her power, so to speak, her magnetism, so to speak, and to secure ignorant sentient beings in reality's expanse, to be able to recognize this reality's expanse. When we talk about phenomenal nature in the Bardo Thödol, they're talking about it as reality's expanse. There is the unborn, the absolute, the Dharmakaya that now has manifested in this display, in this reality's expanse. And all the female deities are the mothers of this expanse. You know, so if you go back and you look at the different deities that we talked about, either in the peaceful deities or the wrathful deities, the female deities, how they're expressed in this way. The Krodheshvari and queens of the expanse. This is what we're talking about. To secure ignorant sentient beings in reality's expanse, the resonance of her charisma, the resonance of her charisma, it's vibrating. It's vibrating, and her charisma is part of that vibration. You know, you meet somebody, sometimes you meet somebody who's got really strong life force, and you can feel it as you approach them. Whether it's a monastic and a religious, spiritual setting, or maybe it's a strong political person, or maybe it's a musical star or a great artist of different kinds and everything. You get closer and closer to them. You can feel their aura. You can feel their vibration. You know that you're in the midst of somebody that has great personal power, or not personal power, but they are the embodiment of that. It's shared by everybody, but with us, it may be much smaller compared to some other beings and so on. So the resonance of her charisma, projecting beings of the chiliocosm into higher rebirths. So now this is more, more down to the inner worlds. There's the trichiolocosm, and here's one of the heliocosm, or one of the heliocosms. So you gotta meditate on this stuff. You gotta get out of the box. You thought it was over, didn't you? You thought you were on a path of meditation. Well, here's something new. So now we come to the next one on page 53. It says, I bow down to the projectoress who carries a Garuda. Her body an exquisite white yellow, signifying her proficiency in the rites of pacification and enrichment, holding to her heart a blood-filled skull to overpower the 5 sensory desires. She carries a Vajra and a large Garuda, projecting the gods into the higher realms. So remember, all these deities, the gods, the demigods, the animals, the human beings, the hungry ghost, the helping, is all part of human being. So it's just maybe, a being who, or a human being who is very much, in the God realm, or very much in the hungry ghost realm, or very much in the hell realms, but they're still human beings fundamentally. At the way we're talking about them right now, the way in which it's manifest, the way they're embodied. So starting at the beginning, who carries a Garuda? The Garuda is a protection bird. There's a bird who is at the threshold of a protection circle, so to speak, who is there to pick up and devour snakes that are considered to be the epitome of ignorance or of evil or whatever, So to protect those beings that are within the protection circle, or those who might be milling around the threshold of getting through the protection circle to come inside the protection circle where the deities are and so on. This bird is there to take those snakes and devour those snakes. And then through that, it makes the bird, the Garuda, stronger, able to do more work. And that maybe through its droppings, that bird then becomes nourishment for other beings who are trying to come in. So there's a cycle that's going on, that those snakes aren't being annihilated, they're just being transformed. So the Garuda is symbolic of that transformation, is the active principle of that transformation. So signifying her proficiency in the rites of pacification and enrichment. Pacification and enrichment. So those are the first two of the enlightened activities. The enlightened activities are pacification, and then the next one is increasing or enrichment. Can we calm things down by pacification? And if we can't do that, well, then can we educate it to a point that whatever fear, whatever terror, whatever confusion is going on, it gets educated and it liberates through that, through the enrichment. Her proficiency in those rites. This is the projectoress who carries a Garuda. Holding to her heart a blood-filled skull, again, with the unqualified enjoyment. To overpower the 5 sensory desires. So the 5 sensory desires, we know the objects of our eyes, the objects of our hearing, the objects of our taste and smell, the objects of our touch. To overpower those sensory desires. She carries a Vajra and a large Garuda. So the Garuda, you can see on the left side of the page is an illustration of a Garuda, which is a huge bird. And the Vajra, which represents the indestructible wisdom, the indestructible wisdom. She carries this symbol of her indestructible wisdom, and the large Garuda, who is the transformation or starts this transformation process of those that are for protection. So projecting the gods into the higher realms. So those beings who have no compassion. Remember that the gods have no compassion. They have great wisdom, but they have no compassion. How else would they allow all the suffering that goes on in the human realm if they had no ability to be able to exercise their wisdom through their compassion? So we say they don't have compassion. So this is taking them through this pacification and enrichment, is saying to the gods, hey, take a look at this. What are you doing? You need to transform yourself. So now we go to the next page, page 54. I bow down to the projectoress who casts a shooting star. Her awesome body, an exquisite blue-black, holding a vajra and casting a shooting star to avert the intensity of the great battle. She drinks blood from a skull, projecting the anti-gods into higher rebirths. So the anti-gods are the jealous gods, the demigods. So I bow down to the projectors who cast a shooting star. So you see on the left side of the page, you see, from her dark blue hand, there's this shooting star that is going up into the heavens, so to speak. Her awesome body, an exquisite blue-black, holding a vajra and casting a shooting star. So the vajra, again, is the indestructible wisdom. And to avert the great battle. What is the great battle? The great battle is our dualistic nature that we go through. So in different traditions, they have different scriptures about it. In the Bible, the Christian Bible, Jewish Bible, the Christian Bible, they talk about the book of Revelations. Is this battle that is raging on, that is the internal mental battle, spiritual battle that the individual is going through. And the Bhagavad Gita is the Lord's song in the Hindu tradition, is the battle that is going on. And Arjuna is going through this whole thing about, how to liberate himself and so on. So here in the Bardo Thödol, we're seeing it in different terms. It's not expressed as this battle in the same way. It's much more, there's much more loving kindness and compassion, joy and equanimity, bodhicitta, that is being expressed in the Buddhist way. I don't know much about some of the other things, but I know that in the Jewish tradition, there's a battle that goes on. I don't know anything about the Islamic tradition. I don't know how they talk about that, but you can see that the different spiritual systems approach this, have this thing that's happening, this battle that's going on. So here, this projectoress who casts a shooting star is circumventing that, is taking us over the battle. She drinks blood from a skull, the unconditional enjoyment, and projecting the anti-gods, the jealous gods now, into higher rebirths. So those who are they're in their battle, they are the epitome of conflict, the jealous gods. They're fighting each other for power, and they're trying to fight the gods who completely ignore them to be able to gain their power. So it's removing them, or it's catapulting them out of their conflict into a higher rebirth. And then on the bottom of page 54, now we go to, I bow down to the projectoress who holds a thunderbolt garland. Her body part red and part black, signifying proficiency in the rites of subjugation and wrath. Her facial expression fixed in domination. To purify and ease outer and inner obscurations, she wields a vajra and a thunderbolt garland, projecting anguished spirits into higher rebirths. The anguished spirits are the hungry ghosts. So we bow down to the projectors who holds a thunderbolt garland. So on the right side of page 54, you can see the hand there, and there's thunderbolts coming out of her hand, and her body part red, part black, signifying her proficiency in the rites of subjugation and wrath. So those are the two other enlightened activities. The first one was pacification, second one was enrichment. Then the third one here is explained as subjugation, and the next one is explained as wrathfulness. So she's proficient in those two very powerful things when pacification doesn't work and enrichment doesn't work. Now subjugation. I got to tie you down. I got to hold you down. I got to magnetize you. I got to bring you in. I have to subdue you in some way. And then wrathfulness is the challenging transformation of that. It's not the annihilation, but it is the transformation, the powerful transformation with great compassion for those beings. Her facial expression fixed in domination to purify and ease outer and inner obscuration. She wields the Vajra and a thunderbolt garland. So the thunderbolt garland. So actually in Hindu, they have a Vajra and they consider it to be the thunderbolt. It's the symbol of the thunderbolt. In the Buddhism, it's not expressed. It's the indestructible wisdom, the power of the indestructible wisdom. In Hinduism, it is the thunderbolt itself. Projecting anguished spirits into higher realms. So these anguished spirits are miserable beings, insatiable beings, and so through this thunderbolt, this that really needs this very, very, very powerful way to move them from their misery. Takes great power to do that. So this is being characterized here by this thunderbolt garland. So the next is on page 55. I bow down to the projectoress who wields an eagle-feathered banner. Her body part white and part black, signifying her proficiency in the rites of pacification and wrath. Drinking blood from a skull to dissolve delusion into emptiness. She holds a Vajra and wields an eagle-feathered banner, projecting animals into higher rebirth. So the animal realm here, those who are ignorant, unable to change their environment, who are easily enslaved. So she bows to the projectoress who wields an eagle-feathered banner. So the eagle-feathered banner is being portrayed here over on the left side here is this, in Tibet, that's called a gyaltsen. It's a banner. It's like a flag, and you see a monastic procession, you'll see these banners being held usually out in front and behind the holy Vajra master who's in the center of the procession. And they're blowing the horns and doing all that and so on. And there's the umbrella that is protecting that Vajra master. But there are these victory banners. These banners are victory banners, the gyaltsen, who wields this eagle-feathered banner, signifying her proficiency in the rites of pacification and wrath. So what does that mean? The two extremes of the enlightened activities. First, the pacification, but then there's on the other side this wrathful challenging, this wrathful transformation, and being able to use that. And sometimes with animals, you got to whack them on the butt sometimes to get them to do what you need them to do. So it's showing that forcefulness, but sometimes they respond to the pacification, the gentleness. And if you're too forceful with them, that's not going to work. You take a turtle and you go over and you challenge a turtle. Well, what does he do? He just withdraws and he's just a rock. But if you're very gentle with him, he won't withdraw into his shell. But if you got a burro or you got a donkey, you might have to give him a whack on the butt to get him to do something. So there are beings like that, aren't there? Human beings. Proficiency of pacification and wrath, drinking blood from a skull to dissolve delusion into emptiness. Delusion into emptiness. What we think is true, the lies that we've told ourselves, the rationalizations that we have used to create our personas that our egos reside in and try and control us and so on, that to dissolve into emptiness, to see that it's all just contrived, it's all just fabricated. It doesn't exist in a real way. It's only temporary. And yet we delude ourselves by thinking that it's real and following these pathways that we've created for ourselves. Or worse, to be duped and seduced into pathways created by others who are manipulating us in one way or another. She holds a vajra and wields an eagle-feathered banner, the victory of being able to do this, you know, and sometimes it's that flag, it's that banner that wins the day. And you can see that happening in some people's minds, you know. Oh, well, let's be part of that group. Look at their victory. Look at their glory that they are going through. I want to be part of that family. Projecting animals into higher rebirths. So then finally, we go to page 56. And it says, I bow down to the projectoress who holds a sword, her body part yellow and part black, signifying her proficiency in the rites of enrichment and wrath. Drinking blood from a skull to dissolve hells into emptiness. She holds a vajra and a sword, projecting the hell beings into higher rebirths. So the animals needed some strong power, and the hungry ghost needed some strong power, and now we're seeing that the hell beings need some strong power. So who holds a sword? So you see the sword on the left side, and this is the flaming sword of wisdom that cuts through ignorance, burns through ignorance, delusion, jealousy, the 5 poisons, all the emotions, cuts through. This is the sword of Manjushri that is cutting through all this delusion, signifying her proficiency in the rites of enrichment and wrath. So the knowledge, you know, the knowledge, how much useless knowledge is there that we take to be true? And we remain on a particular level. And maybe that knowledge works at this level. And we don't go to above that. We don't break through to get up there. And then all of a sudden, all this stuff here that seems to be true from up here now all becomes lies, all becomes untruth. So this burning sword able to cut through that. And wrathfulness, the forcefulness of being able to do this, of recognizing that this is what needs to be done. You know, not to hurt anybody. We're not creating suffering. We are, it is unimaginable compassion that is being expressed here. She holds a vajra and a sword, projecting the hell beings to higher rebirths. So these are the 8 projectoresses. So be on the lookout. You know, maybe you might find yourself in that position to be a projectoress. It's not something that becomes a basis for arrogance. It's something beyond that. It wouldn't work in that arrogant way because this is so pure. It only manifests when the purity is present, or maybe well, it depends how you look at it. You know, if you remove the impurity, then all that's left is the purity. We're basically pure by nature, but it's the compounded impurities that conceal that purity. So these are beings who are there at, depending on which way you're approaching. Are you coming down? Is it from the top down, or are you approaching it from the bottom up? So again, this is, again, the stuff of the Dharma that is so amazing. That is so magnificent. The way this is articulated, in ways that we can approach it. This is all symbolic. It's very dramatic, very theatrical, especially the way I present it. But that's okay, Any questions or comments?
I have two, Lance. One is, I noticed with the projectoresses that both in the text and in the illustrations here, unlike pretty much any of the other deities, all we see is the hand. With 6 of the 8, we hear about body color, but 2 of them, not even that. And because visualization instructions are so precise, is this literally how we envision them, you think, as hands?
Of course not.
But what else would we envision?
It's beyond words.
So, I could imagine, these are wonderful images of like hands rising out of mist almost. And having the body color there.
These are just mnemonics.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it's just the contrast that I'm noticing. It's so different from the other sections. It's not that it really is a problem for visualization so much as, oh, isn't that curious? That's really different than the other sections.
Is it helpful, or does it create an obscuration?
No, I don't. I actually like it, to tell you the truth. I like the difference of it. It leaves more room for creativity. So I don't mind that. So, and my other question's quite different. This 8 projectoresses, I keep wanting to say protectoresses, the 8 great projectoresses. In Gyurme Dorje, as you said, this is in another section entirely. Because we have it here in the Pesha, does that mean, and this wouldn't surprise me at all, that there are other versions where this is included? That is why we have it here in this section?
Well, I can't
Just
speak
curious.
to other versions, the English translations that I've read didn't include it, but it isn't here. And as we move forward further into the remainder of this daily practice, it is referred to. The projectoresses are referred to. So I said, they're referring to this in these prayers. We need to be able to say, identify what this is. So that's why I made the decision to include this in here.
I see. Okay, great.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's that simple.
Thank you.
Lance, I'm curious, when you say include this in here, I know there are different versions. What specifically are you talking about that you included, and why?
These 8 projectoresses, these came from the Bardo Thödol, came from the translation from another practice in the book, in the Bardo Thödol book, that is called the 100-fold homage to the deities. It starts on page, well, I'm not sure, wait a minute. It starts on page 96 in the textbook, in the Gourmet Dorje textbook.
Okay.
So, and we've had empowerment for that a while ago. And if anybody's interested, I've got a red book that is that practice in a red book like this. And I'll be happy to make it available to people if you would like me to send it to you, plus a couple other things. So I've extracted a few things from the Bardo Thödol into these red books. So if you just wanted to go right to this particular practice, you didn't have to go through a lot of pages and a page and everything. And this would take you right to it. So
I'd
I'm
like one
holding
of
this
those.
back, waiting for this moment to be able to share it with you. Yes, Thomas, were you saying something?
Yes, I said I'd like one of those.
Right. Okay, sure.
I have a question, Lance. I'm looking at the table of contents in the Pesci, and I see the 8 great projectoresses. I see the 8 great projectoresses. So it's just that section that you're referring to.
That section is extracted from the Gourmet Dorje book, starting on page 89, which goes into all the 100 different deities.
Oh, well, that leads me to my next question. I admit I'm confused. I know we have 100 deities. Are these 8 projectoresses in that 100 or additional?
Yes, and it's rounded off. I gotta say that it's rounded off because, you know, they talk about 48 peaceful deities and 42 peaceful deities and 58 wrathful deities. So that adds up to 100.
So the 8 are part of the 58.
No.
Oh, they're not.
No.
Okay.
So it would be more. And I can't get into the enumeration, how they decided on these titles and so on, but they tend to round things off. You know, it's like the 1,000 Buddhas behind you. Is it literally 1,000 Buddhas? Or is it 10,000 Buddhas? Or is it 100,000 Buddhas? You know, is it some multiple, some, you know, of the 10 idea, you know, 10,000 or something. If you read the Tao Te Ching, the Tao Te Ching talks about the 10,000 beings or the 10,000 things that are there. And it's a number that they used 2,600 years ago or more to connote, you know, these unimaginable numbers.
Okay. To ask again, because I'm so confused, are these 8 part of that 58 or additional?
Additional.
Okay.
Okay. I'm trying to be as clear as I can. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? Is this interesting to you? I mean, have you ever met somebody who catapulted you in some way like this?
Mhm.
Debbie's the only one?
Yeah, a lot, I think, really. It's not always in huge ways, but just so many people help, and not just people, animals who've made a difference.
Okay.
I just wanted to add, Curtis, that in Gourmet Dorje, it just goes right from the Pisachi and inner gatekeepers to the outer, or I'm sorry, to the Isvari. And in the counting, the outer gatekeepers are included in the Isvari. That always trips me up. because
So you'll see as we go on, like I said, you'll see the reference to the projectoresses in the order in which we've got them here in this book. So it was either taking out the line about projectoresses, or it was adding in this part here to give explanation of the projectoresses. And I think, you know, most people, well, I shouldn't say that, but people have either had the opportunities or didn't recognize the opportunities of encountering these projectoresses like this in their lifetime.
I
Isn't
can
this,
sure use 8 more opportunities, Lance, so thank you.
and isn't this part of what is, if you will, the problem with the Bardo Thödol, that there's so many different versions, there are different ways to configure it or practice it? So at least some differences?
Well, when you say versions, you know, what are you saying, translations?
I don't know. You know, I think I've heard something about there being different versions of it.
Well, there's different let's call it translations. And let's say that there is one Tibetan text that all this comes from, but then it's been translated into English about 6 or 7 times. So this
I
is,
thought there are different versions of the Tibetan text too.
I don't know that. I don't know. Maybe so. It would make sense that there would be. I mean, I could understand that. So I don't know. I'm not a scholar that way, you know. So, but if you really want to, if you want to get into the minutia of stuff, read the translation by Robert Thurman. That'll spin you around on top of your head. You know, you'll be upside down in 3 pages. You know, and his is not complete. It's not, you know, he doesn't, you know, say it's complete. It doesn't go into all the stuff that the Gourmet Dorje book does. That's the power of the Gourmet Dorje book, is it goes into all these different parts of the Bardo Thödol. And the same thing with Sogyal Rinpoche. He's got the book of living and dying, but it's very narrow and it's in a way it's done, and it doesn't go into the elaboration. The closest thing to this, to the Gourmet Dorje, really is the Francesca Fremantle book with Chukpa Rinpoche, is the closest one that goes into the detail of this part of the Bardo Thödol, but it doesn't go into the 100-fold practices. It doesn't go into the, you know, and here is liberation by wearing. You know, there's a lot more stuff in this book. You read the whole book, I mean, it's incredible. It's great.
So is that the version you're referring to?
The Gourmet Dorje
Fremantle?
book. The Gourmet Dorje book. Yes, that's the book that we use. That's the book that we use for this.
That's different than the Fremantle?
Yes, that one's
Yeah.
called Luminous Emptiness.
Yeah. So this book here, this is the book we use, and the Luminous Emptiness is on the shelf over here. So, but it is a terrific book itself. But it's not as complete as this book. Would you agree with that, Debbie?
Yeah, I would. I mean, it's wonderful, but it's very different, really.
So, yeah, it bears reading them all.
Mhm. One thing Curtis reminded me of with his question about different quote unquote versions was something Francesca Fremantle said, that there are other Bardo teachings from other schools of Buddhism, not the Bardo Thödol, but other Bardo teachings that don't include peaceful and wrathful deities. So they go right from the Bardo of dying to the Bardo of becoming. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. She seemed to think that the Nyingma teachings tended to go more into the peaceful and wrathful deities. You know, I don't know firsthand, but I was struck by her mention of that.
Well, even in the Drikung Kagyu, they don't, this is not part of their canon. And they have a teaching called the Yangzab that starts with the Poa, that then goes into, and I haven't studied it, but it's kind of like they extract certain things out of the Bardo Thödol, it seems to me, and, mold this other practice out of that. And really, it's a very practical thing. Like the practices that we have, the sadhanas that we have, were translated for our benefit by Kenshin Rinpoche. That the actual sadhanas may have been sadhanas that were this thick. That would take, a week. That to do a sadhana practice would take a week, because they go through all the sections and they repeat things over and over again. But the essence of those teachings, the concise essence of those teachings or those sadhanas was taken out, and that's what was printed, and that's what we use for our Deity Yoga book. So there's a practical way, and these versions, as Curtis is trying to point out, practical reasons why these versions, were developed.
Lance, did you say earlier that Young suggested that we read this backwards, the last chapter first? Is that what you were saying? Did I understand you correctly?
Yes, that's what Carl Jung suggested. And it's very powerful to do it. I've done it. It's really good. But not until I was really familiar with it going the way we normally go through it.
Oh, okay. Don't do that first then.
Don't do that first.
Okay. Well,
I think,
glad I clarified
do
that.
it the way that it was put forth, and then you can look at the variations.
Okay, thank you.
Don't, in music, you don't want to start improvisating before you know the root script, the root song. And that's what the Buddhists are really good about. If you've ever been to any of the ceremonies and the empowerments and things like that, they read straight from the text, and then they give, their talk about it and so on. And they're very careful to honor and respect and stay with the root text. Is I've never seen a teacher not do that.
Mm-hmm. Lance, could I circle back to something you said about the empowerment for the 8 great projectoresses? I wasn't clear. Is that covered by the Shitro empowerment, or is that a separate one, do you think?
It wasn't specifically covered. It wasn't specifically mentioned when we had the Shitro empowerment. It didn't go through and include all of them by name, but it became an empowerment to understand the symbolic relationship, and we were empowered to then to engage into the practice from there.
Okay, thanks.
Now, of course, that too is relative, because the Shitro empowerment that I received with many other people and everything might be different than the Shitro empowerment that may come from another tradition in the monastery or something like that. Mine was a weekend, it could be a 10-day thing for all I know, where they do go through everything. Is there a discussion? Does anybody, because in my mind, it brings up a question, and that is, at what point can we be liberal with the investigations of these practices? You know, can we say that our experience with these things are valid to whatever level we've experienced them? And if we stay within the confines of our experience, that's okay. Or is it so strict that some people might say, oh, well, this only can come from, you know, a particular Vajramaster, a particular teacher in a particular environment at a particular time and so on. But
How could you go,
what's that?
how could you go outside of your experience? No matter what teacher there is, contemporary or ancient.
Well, some teachers could just be parrots. You know, they use that word, the parrots. They read a book, but they're just quoting from the book, but they haven't had the experience of what that book is transmitting.
They haven't digested it.
They haven't experienced it. They have no realization with it. And you'll hear many of the lamas, you know, in the first 5 minutes of their giving a teaching, many of them will say, you know, I don't have any realization with this, but yet I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah, they nearly all say that.
Huh?
Nearly all of them say that.
Yeah. So is it, you know, who's fooling who? I never understood that.
Neither do I.
So when I asked to be a teacher years ago, and I've asked Gotchen Rinpoche, I've asked Kenshin Rinpoche, I've asked Drupal Thinley Ningpo, I've asked Khenpo Samdop, I've asked Lama Gersum, all my teachers, can I teach? And they all said the same thing. They say, teach what you know.
But if that saying was true for all the lamas, they'd be very limited to what they can teach you.
Maybe
It
so.
strikes to the point.
Maybe so. I'm not gonna. So and that's why you have to. That's why you have to take your time to get to know a particular lama before you regard them as your guru.
Certainly.
Your root guru.
Because just because they're a lama or a teacher, or a lama or a monastic doesn't mean they're realized.
Right.
Bon Rinpoche said to me, said to the whole Sangha, I can lead you to the door, but you have to cross through it yourself. You have to go through the opening yourself.
Okay. So any other comments?
May I say something?
Of course.
I thought about what you said, and I think they go hand in hand. I think possibly this might be a situation where the experience comes more from the lay people, but they don't have the teachings to understand the experience. And the lamas have the teachings, but not necessarily the experience. So when the two merge together, when the lay people want the teachings and possibly able to express their experiences, maybe then there could be some additional layers of learning.
Well, then that begs the question, how is it that you say that? If I understood you, you said that lay people may have had the experience, but not the teaching. How do you know that?
I think a lot of experiences come from near-death experiences. A lot of descriptions match somewhat closely to what the Bardo Thödol describes as far as the clear light and meeting with love and compassion, things of that nature.
Okay. Anybody else have a comment about that?
Sandra had a comment.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, it was back when we were talking about, Shitro empowerment and stuff.
Yes.
I just, because I thought that was perhaps a reason why when you see Bardo teachings advertised and they don't really cover the deities, I really thought it was for this reason, but I never asked anyone, so I don't know. But I thought it was sort of maybe an introduction, like they weren't getting into it without the empowerment, and that's an interesting thing to think about, like when you're talking about how liberal, I don't know, that's a good thing to wonder and maybe talk to a Lama about. I really don't know. The other thing is I really appreciated you sharing Zabum Ho. I'm missing a syllable. Zabum Ho.
Zahong Bam Ho?
Yes, the chain one. I'd love to see you do that again. Can you show it again?
Sure. So you're hooking your right forefinger on the little finger, and you're switching hands, and you're tying with your left forefinger on your right little finger. Then the chain is your left hand like this, and your right hand shaped in the same way, but your right hand is sliding on your left hand. The fingers are like interlocked with each other. Can you see that? And
Yeah,
then
that's great.
and
Yeah.
then you're sliding. The way it was taught to me is that it's sliding like that to show that it's a chain link.
Uh-huh.
And
It's like warp and weft. It's cool.
yeah,
Yeah, but it's hard, a lot of times people do that very sloppily. I don't know how to say it politely, like they sort of hint at the gesture and they don't do it, the Lamas don't do it precisely. So it's really hard to learn. Thank you for showing it.
you're welcome.
And I think you showed it to me. And every day in morning practice, when we do get to the, what is it? Zam Hum Baho, I do it.
Good. Was it in the
It's-
Malaka?
which-
Is it the Mahakala practice or the Achi practice?
I think it's in the Mahakala. I'm not sure, but
Huh?
Achi.
I'm not sure. But
Tom, I can't hear Tom.
It's in the Achi practice.
In the Achi practice, yeah.
But it's kind of like riding a bike. I mean, now I can do it without even thinking, just the way I can do the mandala. We do the mandala offering. I don't have to think about it. I've got the ergonomics down.
Good. Muscle memory. It's like doing the offering mudras.
What's the fourth one, Lance? You showed the three through the,
Yes.
and the fourth.
Is rejoicing.
Okay.
So did you know how to make it? So you're holding your left hand out like this, and then your right hand knuckle to knuckle. So your little finger and your ring finger and your forefingers are interlocked with each other, knuckle to knuckle. And this is the symbol of a bell. This is the mudra of a bell. And so you're ringing the bell, rejoicing.
Okay. Thank you.
And there's another practice that we do that it's Zahong Bam Ho means inviting. Excuse me a second. Inviting, mixing. All of a sudden, my mind just went into a blank. Inviting, joining, mixing, and non-dual.
It's joining.
Joining, yeah. Inviting, joining, mixing, and then non-duality, non-dual as the result.
That's connected with the Zahung Baho.
Yes. In another practice. So the point there is that depending on the practice, these things can can change, depending on the practice. So we're learning it, by way of the lamas and their compassion for sharing this with us. And sometimes they protect us. Sometimes they protect the Dharma. All right. Well, thank you all for paying attention. And so we should recite our, let's see, the prayers. Let's recite the prayers, the aspirational prayers that rescue from the dangerous pathways and the aspirational prayer that protects from fear. So someone who hasn't done this in a while, I would love to have somebody do this, please. So who hasn't read one of these in a while? Let me see. Well, I got here last time. It was John, Bhavani, Tom, and Curtis did it last time. That was a few weeks ago. So Sandra, would you like to do, please, the aspirational prayer that
I was
rescues-
just going,
What?
I was just saying, I was just starting to type goodbye in the chat. I have to go.
Okay, you gotta
I'm
go.
sorry. Thank you. Thank you
Right.
very much, everyone.
You're welcome. Cherry, bye-bye.
Jerry, bye-bye.
All right. Let's see. Kate T, would you like to do one of these?
Not tonight, please.
Okay. Katie, how about you?
I guess so.
Okay. Do the one that starts on page 207 then, please. And then when that's finished, then Debbie, would you mind doing the one on page 214, the aspirational prayer that protects from fear?
Happy to, sure.
Okay,
So 27 through
207,
214.
correct.
Okay.
So please begin when you're ready. Everybody can recite, keep your microphones off.
Aspirational prayer which rescues from the dangerous pathways of the intermediate states. I bow down to the spiritual teachers, meditational deities, and dakinis. May I be guided on the path of their great love. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated bewilderment, may the spiritual teachers, holder of the oral lineages, draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant clear light, which is undistracted study, reflection, and meditation. May the supreme consorts, the host of dakinis, support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageways of the intermediate state, and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated delusion, may the transcendent Lord Virachana draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant blue light, which is the pristine cognition of reality's expanse. May the supreme consort, Akasa Dadvishavari, support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued by the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state, and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by the deep-seated aversion, may the transcendent Lord Vajrasattva Akshobhya draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant white light, which is the mirror-like pristine cognition. May the supreme consort Buddha Lokana draw me, support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by the deep-seated pride, may the transcendent Lord Ratnasambhava draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant yellow light, which is the pristine cognition of sameness. May the Supreme Consort Mamaki support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state, and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated attachment, may the transcendent Lord Amitabha draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant red light, which is the pristine cognition of discernment. May the Supreme Consort Pandra Vasini support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state, and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated envy, may the transcendent Lord Amoghasiddhi draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant green light, which is the pristine cognition of accomplishment. May the Supreme Consort Samayatara support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state, and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by the 5 virulent poisons, may the transcendent conquerors, the male Buddhas of the 5 enlightened families draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant rainbow light, which is the 4 pristine cognitions combined. May the 5 supreme female Buddhas, the purity of the expanse, support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the light paths of the 6 impure classes of beings, and be escorted to the 5 utterly supreme and pure Buddha fields. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated habitual tendencies, may the assembly of spiritual heroes and awareness holders draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant multicolored light, which is co-emergent pristine cognition. May the Supreme Consorts, the host of Dakinis, support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageways of the intermediate state, and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by the deep-seated bewildering perceptions, may the assembly of blood-drinking wrathful deities draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant rainbow light, which is free of fear and terrifying perceptions. May the assembly of Krodishavari, queens of the expanse, support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageways of the intermediate state, and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Om Ahom. May the fields of the 5 elements not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the fields of the 5 Buddhas. May the expanse of space not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the field of the blue Buddha. May the elements of water not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the field of the white Buddha. May the elements of earth not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the field of the yellow Buddha. May the elements of fire not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as a field of the blue Buddha. May the elements of wind not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the field of the green Buddha. May the awesome sounds, light, and rays not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the infinite fields of the peaceful and wrathful deities. May the rainbow-colored elements not rise up as a hostile force. May I see them as the fields of the manifold Buddhas. May I recognize all sounds as my own sounds. May I recognize all lights as my own lights. May I recognize all rays as my own rays. May I spontaneously recognize the characteristics of the intermediate states. May the fields of the 3 Buddha bodies be manifest. Samaya.
Aspirational prayer which protects from fear of the intermediate states. When my life's course is ended and I roam alone in the intermediate states, the loved ones of this world can no longer help me. So at this critical time, May the conquerors, the peaceful and wrathful deities, quickly release the power of their compassion, and may the deep darkness of my ignorance be dispelled. When I roam alone, separated from my loved ones, and myriad images of emptiness arise, naturally manifesting, may the Buddhas quickly release the power of their compassion, and may the fear of the awesome and terrifying intermediate state be annulled. When the 5 radiant lights of pristine cognition dawn, may I recognize them as my own nature, and without awe and without terror, and as the manifold forms of the peaceful and wrathful deities arise, may I be fearlessly confident and recognize the characteristics of the intermediate states. When I experience suffering as the result of negative past actions, may the great compassionate one dispel all such misery. And as the natural sound of reality reverberates like 1,000 peals of thunder, may all sounds be heard as the teachings of the greater vehicle. When I am driven on by past actions, unable to find a refuge, may the meditational deities dispel all such misery. And as I experience the suffering of habitual tendencies and past actions, may the meditative stabilities of inner radiance and bliss naturally arise. When I am miraculously born into the intermediate state of rebirth, may I not be beguiled by the perverse prophecies of Mara. And as I freely arrive at every place that I think of, may the bewildering fear and terror generated by my negative past actions not arise. When the roars of savage wild beasts echo around me, may their cries be transformed into the sound of the sacred teachings, the 6 syllables, Om Mani Padme Hum. And as I am engulfed by snow, rain, wind, and darkness, may I achieve the pure clairvoyance of radiant, pristine cognition. May sentient beings in the intermediate state, similar in kind to myself, be born into the higher realms, free from rivalry. And as severe dissonant mental states generate insatiable hunger and thirst, may the afflictions of hunger, thirst, heat, and cold be annulled. When I see my future parents in union, may I perceive them as Mahakurunika and consort, and for the sake of others, being blessed with the power to choose a birthplace, may I achieve an exalted body, adorned with the auspicious major and minor marks. Once I have achieved birth in a supreme human form, may I act so as to swiftly liberate all who see and hear me. And may I not be influenced by my negative past actions, but multiply and emulate my past merits. Wherever I may be born, in whatever land it may be, may I quickly encounter the meditational deity of my past lives. Knowing from immediately after birth how to speak and walk, may I remember my past lives and attain the power of non-forgetfulness. May I easily come to master by study and reflection the manifold stages of learning, small, intermediate, and great. May the country into which I am born be auspicious, and may all sentient beings be blessed with happiness. O peaceful and wrathful conquerors, may I and all others become entirely one with you and come to resemble you in all your forms, your retinues, your lifespan, and your Buddha fields, and in every quality of your supreme auspicious marks. Through the compassion of Samantabhadra and the infinite peaceful and wrathful deities, by the power of the truth of pure reality, and by the blessing of the mantrans who practice one-pointedly, may every wish of this inspirational prayer be fulfilled. Samaya. Composed by the preceptor from Odhyana Padmakara, may this profound sacred teaching not be extinguished until all the worlds of cyclic existence have been emptied. This is a treasure text of Tulku Karma Lingpa.
Very good. Thank you. Can we go to the closing prayers, please?
Emaho. In the center is the marvelous Buddha Amitabha of boundless light. On the right side is Avalokiteshvara, the Lord of great compassion. On the left is Vajrapani, the Lord of powerful means. All are surrounded by limitless Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Immeasurable peace and happiness is the blissful pure land of Dewachen. When I and all beings pass from samsara, may we be born in Dewachen without taking samsaric rebirth. May I have the blessing of meeting Amitabha face to face. By the power and blessings of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, may I attain this aspiration without hindrance. Teata pensadria awa bodhanaya soha. Teata pensadria awa bodhanaya soha. Teata pensadria awa bodhanaya soha. This is it. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 5 families and 3 times who destroyed defilement lead to the equipoise of the enlightened mind. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. By this virtue, may I achieve all knowingness by defeating all enemies' confusion. May all who travel on the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of suffering. As Manjushri the warrior realized the ultimate state, and as did Samantabhadra, I will follow in their path and fully dedicate all the merit for all sentient beings.
Om Mani Padme Hum Shri. 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 Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 Om Mani Padme Hum Shri. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you,
See you.
Sango.
All right. Thank you.
Lance.
Yes.
Everyone have a good night.
All right. You
Good
too.
night,
Thank you,
everyone.
Tom.
Good night. Good night.
Thank
See you all
you.
next week, if not
you.
sooner. Okay. Tomorrow, Bones of the Buddha. Okay. All right.
Hey, Lance, what's the movie tomorrow night?
Bones of the Buddha.
Bones of the Buddha. Okay. Okay.
Oh, Lance, is that the Secrets from the Dead thing?
Yes.
Oh, that's incredible. That is just incredible, Lance. That's really neat.
Okay. We'll be there. Thank you, guys.
Good night.
Good night.
Curtis, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Lance.
It looks like you shaved today.
Yesterday.
Okay. Excuse me.
I'll tell you what my adventure was today. Maybe it was today, but anyway, yesterday, I think, and today. There were some prayer flags. They were tied with rope up in a couple of the trees. And one of them you wouldn't see in the summer because of the green. And the other one I just never thought you could get to. But I realized you could get to them, no problem with the long ladder. And I'm glad I did it because the ropes were cutting into the bark badly.
Oh, my.
And they looked like trash up there because they were really falling apart. So anyway, I had fun getting that out of my system.
All right, good. I wish you wouldn't do that by yourself.
You know, I don't mean to scare anybody, but it couldn't have been safer.
Okay.
Just really couldn't. I mean, even with the snow, the ladder was completely stable and it was okay. I didn't feel unsafe at all.
All right.
But thanks for your sentiment. And I would not do this all the time. That would be getting a little too risky.
Okay. All right. Well, good night, everybody. I'm glad you're safe. Everybody stay well. We can't wait for this COVID thing to be over yet again.
Yeah, by the way, they think it's going to peak case-wise in 3 weeks. And then the hospital stuff will peak a couple weeks after that, maybe. So it's going to burn through quickly and then it'll taper off.
Okay.
Lance, did you know that the carport fell?
Yes.
Okay, I forgot if I told you.
Well, I saw the pictures and everything.
Okay, that's right. You saw them. Okay.
It needed to be supported on all 4 points.
Yeah, and probably it needed to be put in with the 2 main pylons the way the instructions said. It never was. But 4
Okay.
pylons would solve it at this point.
All right.
Good night.
Good night. Good night, John.
Good night. Have a good weekend. Hopefully see you tomorrow.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
All right. Cheery. Bye-bye.
Thank you. See you. Have a good
Bye.
night.